We are aware of a number of businesses and colleagues unable to join us today. So we're recording all of our webinar series to ensure that if people are unable to attend, they can always watch back at a time that suits them. So a warm welcome to anyone who's watching the recording today. Fantastic to have so many of you with us today, and I'm confident that over the next hour, we'll be able to provide you an insight into the wide range of support available to businesses across Greater Manchester. Today, this is the third of our schedule of resilience webinars, and we're going to hear from a panel of business specialists in the area of cost reduction. And I'm confident that you will take away something from today's discussions that you can implement within your own business and that will create a positive impact. But before we meet our panel, I just want to set the scene around our resilience campaign and talk a little bit about the support that's available, not only from ourselves at the GM Business Growth Hub, but also the wider business support landscape. Here for Business is Greater Manchester's recognised business resilience campaign, and it's here to provide reassurance and targeted support for businesses in need. The campaign itself is focused on giving businesses in Greater Manchester the best possible start to 2025, and it's being developed to support businesses across a range of key concerns and specific pain points, those being managing costs, increasing sales, both domestic and international, financial and business planning, and employment law. Now, along with our local authority and business support partners across Greater Manchester, including the business representative organisations and Business Growth Hub partners, the wider business support provider network as well will be delivering a series of webinars and events, as well as web resources to cover all you need to know about the fundamentals of doing business. In each hour-long webinar, we will touch on business resilience, increasing sales, reducing costs, financial planning, and also short and long-term business planning, as well as employment. And I'll share details of these future webinars later in the session. I hope that you will all take away some helpful information, and I'd encourage you to raise awareness of the events and resources that are available, and most importantly, the support that's available, and really spread the word of that through your own networks. You can drop comments and questions into the chat as we go along. My colleague Haley will be managing today's webinar in the background, and we will have a chance to ask some audience questions towards the end of the webinar. So who are Greater Manchester Business Growth Hub? Well, we are Greater Manchester's business support organisation. We exist to improve lives in communities across our city region, and we do that by unlocking the business potential across the economy in Greater Manchester. We're able to do this through our UK Shared Prosperity funding. We provide support across a wide range of services, and we refer to those services as our thematic pillars of support. We provide support across sales, increasing sales performance, funding, finding the right financial support for your business, people, the development of workforce and leadership skills, alongside social impact, sustainability through decarbonisation and cost efficiency, innovation through positive operational change and the development of new products and systems and ways of working, and of course our enterprising new offer for the early stage and startup support. The slide that you're looking at sets out those pillars, but also alongside the thematic support that we provide, we're also able to provide support sector specific across those key sectors of advanced manufacturing, health innovation, green technology, digital creative and tech, foundational economy, and of course the social economy. Alongside our local place-based teams, all of our support drives productivity and supports the creation and safeguarding of jobs in Greater Manchester, as well as creating an inclusive growth across the city region. And of course, as I've mentioned before, it's fully funded and comes at no cost to you. Within the wider business support landscape, there's also a wealth of help for businesses out there. We work hard to partner and collaborate with other providers of support to ensure that the business journey is as fluid and supportive as possible. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our partner organisations for their contribution to this campaign. Businesses in Greater Manchester have had a wide range of challenges to navigate in recent years, whether that's the pandemic, the changes that it brought to ways of working practices, whether it's employment law, or indeed the natural and weather-related challenges that we've seen in recent weeks. There really has never been a better time to raise awareness to the help that's out there for businesses. Now, of course, some sectors of the economy have prospered, and we really do have a lot to celebrate in Greater Manchester. We lead the way in many areas of the national economy. We have amazing assets, and business confidence remains high. That's highlighted in our own monthly survey of businesses. But of course, many businesses are finding it challenging, and today's webinar provides us the opportunity to touch on some of those key areas impacting businesses. Now, to assist in today's exploration and discussion, I'm fortunate to have with me on today's webinar 4 colleagues who are specialists in their field, and we're going to find out a little bit about them, what they do on a day-to-day basis to drive productivity and economic growth, and to discuss some of the examples of what they're doing to create positive impact within the businesses that they're working with. We will have a chance, as I mentioned before, to take audience questions towards the end of the session. There is no such thing as a silly question. So please, I'd encourage the audience to register any questions in the chat, and we'll ensure that those are posed to the panel, as I say, towards the end of today's webinar. So I'm going to invite our panel into the room. Today, we are fortunate to have with us a panel of 4. We have Geoff Crossley, Senior Manufacturing Business Advisor at the Business Growth Hub. We have Alasdair Dalzel-Job, Technical Lead at Green Economy. We're joined by Calum Lewis, Managing Director at Optima, Supply Chain and Logistics Specialists. And finally, Phoebe Baker. Phoebe's a Senior Account Manager at the Pilot Group. So welcome to our panel. Great to have you all with us, and hopefully our technology won't let us down today. But what I want to do first and foremost is just find out who you are, what you do, and how you're working to support businesses. So Phoebe, I'm going to come to you first. Are you okay to introduce yourself?
Of course. I'm Phoebe, so Senior Account Manager for the Energy Controls Division at Pilot Group. I've been with the business just over 6 years, and my role is about helping new and existing customers implement smart energy control systems that reduce cost and carbon. So my role is very much about driving efficiency, sustainability, and innovating with the client to essentially optimize their energy usage and future-proof their operations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phoebe. Welcome to today's call. Geoff, over to you.
Yeah, Geoff Crossley. I look after the manufacturing group for Greater Manchester, manufacturing advisors for Greater Manchester. Our team work with manufacturers across Greater Manchester, looking at efficiencies, how to develop them, how to work with them, and how to make them more profitable and better, and save costs as well. So.
Thanks, Geoff. Great to have you with us. Calum, come to you next.
Hi, good morning. Calum Lewis. I'm Managing Director at Optima Supply Chain. My background is coming up to 30 years in supply chain and logistics activities, including sort of 15 years with Lego, the toy company, before I formed Optima in 2020. We're supply chain consultants. We partner with businesses to work across all aspects of supply chain, the end-to-end supply chain. So that might be sourcing, procurement, manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, inventory, planning, etc. We take quite a unique approach based on systems thinking and design thinking to try and work with businesses and create sustainable results. Typically, we're working with businesses to improve service, reduce costs, manage working capital, and overall drive improved returns, sustainable return on investment.
That's great. Lovely to have you with us, Calum. Thanks for joining us today. And finally, last but not least, Alasdair, I'll come to you.
Morning, everybody. Alasdair Dalzel-Job, I'm technical lead at Green Economy. So Green Economy are part of the growth company, same as the Business Growth Hub. And we provide support in two levels, one of which is those businesses in the green sector and helping them to grow. The side that I work on is more around business support to all organisations to reduce environmental impact and reduce cost. So the two go very well hand in hand. And I've been doing this sort of work for about 18, 19 years. Focused a lot more on energy efficiency in recent years, as you can imagine. But I'm also a chartered waste manager, an ESOS lead assessor. So we do a lot of work for all size, all scale of businesses, both some funded work and commercial.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you, Alasdair. Great to have you with us. And clearly a huge amount of many years of expertise and expertise across, I suppose, a wide range of cost reduction elements. So let's get into the questions, shall we? How are we going to reduce costs for our Greater Manchester businesses? And Geoff, I think I'm going to come to you first, because I know we've talked previously about the approach that you take with the clients that you're working with to support the reduction of costs in their business. And we talked a little bit around the 3 and the 8, the 3 being the ways to increase profit, and the 8 being those, I suppose, as you referred to them, the usual suspects by way of ability to reduce costs. Now, I know we're limited on time, Geoff, and you could probably spend a whole day talking about the 3 and the 8, but I wonder if you could maybe just take a few minutes to elaborate for the audience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with any manufacturer, you're going to get an operating procedure, and sort of we like to box things off and have lists of things that we tick check. The 3 we talk about, we generally sort of look at manufacturing businesses as how you can increase profits. There's only 3 ways you can increase profit, which is one is you raise your prices, which is always unpopular and often impossible. Your clients just won't accept it. You can sell more product, which is actually what we're all trying to do 24/7. So that's another one. We're already doing that one. The third one is the one that is very important today, is reduce costs. If you reduce your costs, that naturally increases your profit and your productivity altogether. And obviously, in reducing costs, therefore, becomes probably the easiest, quickest way to improve profits that you might not have looked at straight away. The team of advisors we've got at the Growth Hub, they're focused on looking at what we call non-value adding activity, which is really, I would describe as anything you wouldn't want to put on the invoice to the client. So things like sort of making a cup of tea before you sort of start a meeting, that wouldn't go on the client, but it's in there. So how do you actually look at the different things around the work we're doing? And that's where I'm coming from about the 3 bit, as in sort of like reducing costs is really important and should become a habit of what you're doing every day. Waste, I think myself and Alasdair describe waste in different ways. Alasdair sort of begins to talk about waste as waste energy, etc. I'm looking at sort of more the softer things within a manufacturing plant or any business, which is, so things like the 8 would be defects and rework. Ask yourself, are the same mistakes recurring that we could stop? If you can stop a defect occurring forever, we never need to go back to it. Over processing, does your customer require all the work you do? Does the inside really need painting? Does it need polishing to that extent? Overproduction. We all tend to do this when we had photocopies. We'd all make a couple of extra copies. Manufacturers do that as well. They'll make a couple of extra just in case one goes wrong. And no, you don't need to get it right first time. Waiting, yeah, waiting for access to information. How long do you have to hang on for information to arrive? Yeah. Inventory is a massive one, which is stock with no order against it. Now, this is a massive one, and I do know of businesses that have had hundreds of thousands of pounds of stock that doesn't have a client allocated to it, that's left over that people have kept things for. Transportation, needing to shift things from A to B in the business, and that can be knowledge, can be things, can be sort of objects, can be motion. The next one, very similar to that, is motion, which is how you handle things during the process. How many times it needs handling, how many you picking it up and looking at. And then the big one at the end is the skills, which is underutilizing your people. We very often get a manager who manages what they want, but they manage as they don't allow the people they've got, who they've employed, to use their intelligence, to use their skills to deliver more. So you end up with one person doing the job rather than 8 people doing the job. And it's a very important thing to actually look at that one. And we look at all those things, and sort of every business will have strengths and weaknesses across all those 8 that we look at. And we can talk to businesses about how to change things and how to improve things. So that's a quick précis of what we do.
And that's great, and it's quite enlightening, really, the different strands that a business can look at to I suppose to optimize efficiency. And you touched on transportation as an example, and Calum, I suppose, coming across to yourself, Calum, you represent that supply chain and logistics sector to a certain extent, and I know when we spoke, you mentioned a range of optimization methods that a business could consider to reduce costs. Could you maybe talk us through some of those methods and maybe some of the associated trade-offs in the short term that come alongside those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose when we think about supply chain management overall, the real objective of supply chain management is to make the flow as efficient from, if you like, raw materials or whatever components, right through to the end use, the sort of a customer, the end user of that product. So it's really about managing flow through the entire supply chain. It's really the objective of what we're trying to look at. And focusing on flow is something I think is critically important. Flow of materials, flow of information. I guess the critical things when we're looking at the total supply chain, the critical thing when you're looking at a total supply chain is how is flow affected through it? And that's fundamentally majorly affected by 2 things, variability and cadence. What do I mean by variability? Obviously, customers will buy, and they buy in certain natural variation of demand. Sometimes they might buy 10 a week, sometimes they might buy 5, whatever it is. So there's a natural variability to both demand and supply. But we tend and find when we're looking at supply chains with businesses, they're usually part of an overall supply chain, and that variability can get propagated right across the chain. So what do I mean by that? Well, one, they may have a natural demand of a certain number a week, but then that gets translated through inventory calculations, through manufacturing, etc., into quite big oscillations. So 1,000 one week and nothing the next, etc., that sort of thing. Indeed, we were working with a major flooring supplier quite recently, and they were experiencing that. They had their natural demand for the flooring product, which was going into houses and into hotels and things like that, was relatively stable. You could predict that reasonably well. But by the time orders went to raw material factories, the variability was huge. So ordering 10,000 meters one month and then 0 the next, for example. So those factories used to buffer for that variability by quoting very long lead times. So long lead times basically mean more inventory, more cost for the flooring supplier. So we rejigged that. We look at how they did their inventory ordering and manufacturing scheduling and smoothed that out using what we call a demand-driven approach. The effect of that was to take those manufacturing lead times or the supply lead times down from 3 months to 1 month. That allows dramatic improvement in service, dramatic reduction in inventory, around 25%, and associated cost, storage and handling of all that inventory. So that's one example where getting to grips with that variability is important. And now, if you understand it, measure it, you can make some significant differences. That's taking. Sorry, go on, Colin.
Well, I was just going to come in with an additional one there, Calum. So that reduction from 3 months to 1 month, how long did that transition take?
That took us around 9 months to cover all the relevant major suppliers into that business. It was one of those scenarios where if you don't ask the question, you don't get the answer. We asked the question, for each manufacturing supplier, what could they deliver? And they said they could turn orders around in 3 to 4 weeks, whereas they're currently quoting 90 plus days. So once you get that insight, which we knew would be the case if you could stabilize the ordering pattern, then we were able to take out a lot of inventory.
Which I suppose is a great example of that initial investment that's necessary to ultimately, on a long-term basis, reduce costs. Yeah.
It's quite an effort. In essence, for example, we did an exercise to measure what the variability of the demand was, i.e. end customer demand, and it was quite low. We used some statistics to look at that. And then we measured the variability of the orders this business was placing on these suppliers, and that was high. Typically 80 to 100% variability on what 1 month to the next. So naturally enough, if you're receiving that variability from a customer, you're going to try and buffer that. And their cheapest way of doing it was putting long lead times. So that was quite a transition. Now, the next. Sorry, but when we're looking at supply chains and flow through supply chains, yes, we look at variability, we look at cadence. We also delve into the detail, and in quite a lot of instances, it's possible to sort of try and simplify what's going on in that business. Sometimes complexity is really adding to the variability that you see in that business. So what do I mean by simplify? It's things like, the product range, the SKU range. We worked with an industrial parts distributor who, when we did the initial analysis of how many stock keeping units they had, it came up at over 300,000. And when we did the analysis of that, because they'd grown a bit by acquisition, they had duplicate products in there, finished products. They had duplicated components because they used to do some assembly work for things like hydraulic valves, pneumatic valves, etc. And they had duplicate components. So you mentioned the time, Colin, to get into that. That took us about a year of consolidated work to try and simplify their product range, their component range. And it went from, like I said, something like 300,000 stock keeping units to about slightly less than 100,000, with about 35,000 being their most sold items. And these are quite big numbers, but that's a dramatic reduction in complexity, which will allow them to take out cost, take out inventory, and in fact improve service. So I know Geoff mentioned earlier, there's some of the extended product just sat around doing nothing, inventory doing nothing. This was another example where putting that effort in and understanding what's the dynamics of the business. So where are you getting sales on what items? Have you got duplicate items? Can you rationalize that in any way? Was very powerful. And it sort of dovetails with the sourcing. Lots of businesses, they go out, they procure stuff clearly. Doing a sort of a category approach to that can also help. You might spend a lot of money on a particular product or product range. Is that easy to source? Is it hard to source? They sort of dictate different approaches, because if it's relatively easy to source, you can shop around and you can find best prices. If it's hard to source and you spend a lot of money on it, then maybe collaborating with those suppliers to find ways of integrating your supply chains could yield some benefit. Okay.
No, that's super helpful, and I suppose it touches on that need to understand your stock and ultimately the data that sits behind that. And I know we're going to touch on that as we move through today, but I'm gonna first of all just encourage the audience again. Please do drop any questions into the chat function, because we will be coming to audience questions towards the end of today's webinar. But I'm just going to come to you next, Alasdair, because cost reduction around energy consumption it's a big deal for businesses at this point in time, and especially the producers, the manufacturers that I know Geoff and yourself work quite closely with. Can you maybe talk us through what you look for when working with a business in terms of how they can reduce costs, and maybe even if you can provide an example of the sorts of cost reductions a business might be able to make?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the first thing to note is that there's a sort of a wishful thinking around energy, that the prices are going to return to some kind of pre-COVID levels where we're paying maybe 17, 15 pence a kilowatt hour for electricity and 1 or 2, maybe 3 pence for gas. Unfortunately, the news isn't great on that. A bit maybe similar to interest rates these days, is that it's going to take a long time for them to fall. So in terms of sort of holding off on doing things and maybe thinking, actually, do we need to worry about it if energy prices are going to fall? It's not going to fall in the short term. It's going to be a much more slower, a gradual reduction, and they aren't going to go back to pre-COVID levels. That's probably fair certainty. So yeah, how can you then insulate yourself against these constant price shocks that we are having, both on gas or electricity? I like to look in 3 different ways. One of which is data. The other is people and management commitment, and the third is around the opportunities and projects that you might want to look at for the first time or revisit. Starting off with data, as we all know, if you don't understand and manage where and when energy is being used, you don't know how much you're wasting. So one of the first things I suggest is that if your site has a rating of more than its maximum demand is more than 100 kilowatts or 100 kVA, you will have a half-hourly read energy meter on your site. And indeed, most operational businesses these days have half-hourly read meters or smart meters. Fairly easy to spot. If you've got 00 on your energy, your electricity bill, you'll have half-hourly data available, and it's a legal requirement for your supplier to give you that data. So they are giving you this data in, say, a spreadsheet form, and it'll have 48 data points along the top, so half-hourly read, and then 365 rows per year of that data. What you can then do is conditional formatting. So on the Format tab, conditional formatting immediately brings to life all of those color dependent highs and lows throughout your day and throughout your week, including weekends. If you're not a 24/7 or 24/5 business, then you can immediately see the wastage and then help quantify that. So one of the things we did with a company in Altrincham a few years ago now, we looked at their half-hourly data, and we found that their £88,000 worth of electricity they were spending every year, of that £88,000, £22,000 worth of that energy was spent when nobody was in the building. No, they're not running lights out. They're not running any overtime, out of hours operations, any machinery. There's nothing going on that site. It's a general sort of light maintenance and engineering operation. Nothing going on at that site out of hours. So you could then start to tick off things off the list. Okay, maybe you've got some safety and security lighting, some CCTVs, some cameras operating in maybe the odd server room, maybe or server rack. There might be something to do with that, but that is nowhere near going to be 20% of your 25% of your energy. So really digging into that we were able to calculate that energy wastage and then highlight that it was a compressor that was left on to generate nitrogen. They have a nitrogen generator. They just left this thing on all night, and also a parts washing machine. So it kept basically like a light kettle, but massive heater elements in the base of this thing that just tick over, run all the time, out of hours. So do those need to be operational all the way through the night, especially the weekends? No, they don't. How long does it take them to warm up? Well, it's about half an hour. Well, that's fine. Just put a timer on in the morning, set them to run from, say, 6:30 when they're needed at 7:30, just a bit of a buffer. Massive energy savings to be had there. Yeah, maybe you're not going to save £22,000, but you could at least cut that in half. So that's data, and that's a really important one to start off with. The second one is people. So we look at it in terms of understanding that you've got commitment from the top. If you're not in the director position of your business, but you maybe need to persuade co-directors or other people within the organisation, or you're not that person yourself, you need to get their buy-in to give you resourcing. By that, I don't necessarily mean money, I just mean time. So understanding that you've got to bring people along this journey to help with these opportunities, because we know that the cheapest and quickest way to reduce energy consumption is through behaviour change and use of energy. In fact, we've identified over the last 20 years of doing this sort of work that half of the opportunities we've spotted in businesses to do with resource and energy efficiency, half of those have either a zero capex or a very, very low cost. We're talking, of £100, £50 to buy something, and that then makes you money from day one, or your payback is maybe a few weeks. So those really quick and easy things to do, they won't necessarily save you huge amounts of money, but you can do them tomorrow. But a lot of them do require staff to be on board with this. So you've got to talk their language, talk about how it's going to make their job easier, it's going to save money for the business, and then how that can maybe impact their life in terms of whether there's some incentive schemes or just general profitability of the business. So once you've got data, you've got some people involved, it's looking at those bigger projects. So you maybe looked at the quicker wins, you've looked at your energy data and seen where the wastage is. That's all done and dusted. You've talked to your people, they've helped you to reduce energy costs where you can. Now you're starting to look at energy projects. So what do we do to actually make bigger capital investment? So for example, LED lighting. One of the main things to say is you can't now buy fluorescent tubes and certain halogen and discharge lamps anymore. Well, you can buy them, but they're very expensive. So it's going to naturally happen where you go to your wholesaler and they'll say, well, we don't have those, but we've got one of these LEDs instead. What I would argue is, rather than replacing them as they fail, definitely just do it as a whole project. So if you've got the whole office, just get them all replaced. They're so cheap and easy to do. And the payback for a typical 2,500 hour office environment might be 2 years. For a 2-shift or a 3-shift operation, it'll be a matter of maybe 8 to 10 months payback. So you'll have 115% return on your investment. So just do those things tomorrow. That's the sort of thing, the advice I would give you all on this is tackle those energy projects like lighting, because they are very quick to return their investment. Then we start to look at the bigger ones like solar PV and the bigger energy investments. And then you might think, well, we don't have the cash to do it. There are so many funding and finance options with pay-as-you-save schemes. So you pay a repayment on your loan against something like solar PV. You pay off that loan, and the savings on energy are always more by 30 or 40%. So you're cash positive from day one. You don't have to spend out from your reserves, and you're in it straight away. A bit more planning, and we can obviously help with all of that sort of stuff. But all of those things together, and loads of different things will happen in different orders. But I'd say that's probably the order in which I would tackle energy saving projects.
That's super helpful. Thank you for that, Alasdair. And I suppose in every respect, we're doing that on a residential basis, as we monitor, with our own sort of residential use. And really, you're just extrapolating that out from a a wider perspective. And you touched on the I suppose, the use of data and technology. And I'm going to come to Phoebe, because Phoebe, the pilot group advises many businesses on their carbon reduction and energy usage through, I suppose, the adoption of smart, sustainable, and safe infrastructure solutions. So, what in your view, Phoebe, would be the natural first steps a business should be taking if they want to better manage their business costs? And what role does technology play in that?
Yeah, I'll kind of just echo exactly what Alasdair said around the steps that you take, and the logical steps to go on that carbon reduction journey, but also that energy cost reduction journey as well. I mean, where I would typically start would be around implementing monitoring and measurement tools to kind of track that real-time consumption data. And there's a number of tools out there that have got data analytics behind it, where you can start to understand energy consumption on a granular level in respect of equipment and circuit boards on distribution boards as well. And that'll help you identify peak usage and any kind of excessive waste that you've got. The next step that I would possibly take as well is actually setting clear energy management goals in regards to kind of KPIs, what kind of percentage reduction you want to see in terms of kilowatts, whether that be on electric or gas consumption, and then ultimately setting a cost reduction goal as well, because they both really go hand in hand. And then thirdly, adopting kind of that behavioural change piece and making staff aware around what they need to do in terms of best practice, in terms of shutdown periods and things like that. But where the technology comes into it really is, one, through that monitoring and measurement tools, but there are energy efficient technologies out there that kind of take the manual intervention and the reliance away on individuals to seek reductions. So as an example, we specialize in an energy control system, so we don't look at any kind of retrofitting. We retrofit onto kind of existing HVAC equipment, and essentially what that will do is optimize through various control strategies we've got to essentially reduce the consumption of each item that we take control of. But not only that, we're enabling clients to essentially manage their estate much more efficiently at a click of a finger and actually monitor the environment, where they're able to make a lot more informed decisions around their environment and the data, which ultimately is going to kind of lead them to meeting those cost reduction targets and meeting those KPIs around carbon as well. And there's lots of technologies out there that can optimize usage. And I think the way that technology takes a massive role in it going forward is actually enabling people to do things at a click of a finger, but also that automation piece where it's not relying on individuals in a business. You can kind of sit comfortably knowing that the technology is kind of working its magic in some respects. And it kind of goes back to step one as well, in terms of monitoring and having those measurement tools in place, where any kind of capital investment that you put for energy efficient technology and optimization projects, you can actually verify the results of that through those monitoring platforms as well.
That's fascinating. And obviously every business wants to ensure that they're getting a return on those sort of investments, capital investments. And I suspect as well, Phoebe, with the emergence of AI, that will begin to play a deeper role as well. But I suppose bringing it back to, I suppose, the types of tariffs businesses are able to gain on their energy. From your perspective, is there ways and means in which a business could or should be engaging with its energy provider at all to ensure that it is receiving the most favorable tariff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot businesses can be doing around engagement with their energy providers. what I would always recommend is regular tariff reviews. Energy prices do fluctuate quite a lot within the market and in the year. So essentially staying informed around the energy market and what, kind of the market rate is doing can actually help a business negotiate better terms with that energy provider. And also, don't be afraid to kind of compare providers as well. There's an essence of, yes, loyalty and ease of sticking with a provider, but if you're looking at understanding comparison around two different providers, you can also actually use that as leverage if you do want to stay with that existing provider out of ease to potentially negotiate better terms with your current provider. And also don't be afraid to kind of ask around discounts and incentives, around any kind of bulk purchase discounts that you might receive or loyalty rewards if you've been with that provider a while, but also any incentives around energy efficiency improvements as well. As much as a business has to take charge of energy efficiency projects, what also it should be driven by the supplier as well. So no doubt there will be incentives around that. And I think also the key message is that if, for instance, you've done all of that and you've engaged with that supplier and you as a business don't necessarily still think that you've got a good tariff, it goes back to that technology piece. And ultimately what that means is that you are essentially as a business taking back control, because as long as you're monitoring your energy consumption or putting technology in to optimize and reduce energy consumption, that is ultimately the way that a business is going to take back control and mitigate any costs around increasing energy prices if obviously a good tariff couldn't be agreed.
Yeah, and that element of control is really important, and I think one of the themes through today's discussion is that element of investing, whether that be in time or tools that can support you, but ultimately that is you taking control of the situation, and that time or money that you might need to spend will ultimately produce results. And I mean, obviously, Phoebe focuses a lot in her role around those management systems and technology. And Calum, I'm going to come back to you because we touched on data and data management earlier, and everything that Phoebe has talked about, and indeed Alasdair, that understanding of and monitoring of data. How important is it to be data driven, and how important is the accuracy of data in supporting cost reductions?
It's just, you could argue it's a sort of foundation of what you're trying to do. It's pretty foundational, fundamental. Quite a lot of the work we do when we get involved with businesses, we find data that's got discrepancies, be that in master data, things like product, customer, supplier information, that sort of stuff. And then process data where things aren't captured accurately. If you've got to put a reason code on something for, I don't know, a delivery going wrong or whatever it is, all sorts of things can become inaccurate or imprecise in some way or another. And when we think, well, there's a lot of talk about digital transformation. You mentioned AI a second ago, Colin. Really, I think it's understanding the data in a business, how it's moving around, what's its role, how it flows, what decisions are made on the basis of it. That is fundamental to sort of understanding the opportunities for digital transformation, and the use of AI. Because at the end of the day, like many things, it's what you put into it, what you get out of it, right? So if this AI tool is operating off not good, particularly precise or good data or sufficient data, then it's not really going to add much to you. So yes, a bit of a roundabout way, but answering it, the data integrity in a business is critical, and we sort of advocate an approach called data stream mapping. So you understand what the data is, where it's moving, how it's used, what its dependencies are, and that's pretty critical to making some of these transitions to new technologies.
Well, that's really helpful. Thank you, Colin. Um, I'm thinking about keeping everything as simple as possible as well. And Geoff, I'm going to come back to you with a really simple question, and I think I'm coming to you because you're going into those businesses. You're really looking at the bigger picture. And some of those cost reductions can be straightforward, some of them a little more complex. But a dead basic question, Geoff. How easy is it for our audience or businesses across GM to reduce their costs?
Okay, well, it's very easy, but it's also very hard. If you take a step back into the lives of what are many SME directors, managers, owners of businesses, they're very busy people. And yeah, the biggest problem they've got isn't quite complacency, it's distraction. The day-to-day stuff is going on every day. There's demands on them about what's happening. So the client ringing up. So that's what makes it difficult. But what I would recommend is that they took time to do something. Cost reduction isn't, yes, we can find fantastic cost reductions quite quickly. We can go into a company and say, get rid of that inventory. It's been there for 5 years. It's done nothing. Sell it on, move it on. Yes, we can do those sort of things. But cost reduction is more of a long-term work of bring it onto the agenda, do something with it, collect data, understand it. It's never going to be it's very rarely going to be the actual thing, the function of the business that is inefficient. It's everything around it. It's a little bit like Alasdair's, compressor left on at night. It was complacent that they didn't actually understand it was left on at night. It wasn't on their agenda. There's many things like that in a business that look around the outside of the business. That's where the big savings are actually going to be arriving. The people who make something are experts in what they make. It's not about the efficiencies of that. They're really good at that. It's the other things around the business. It's how they order things, how they get things delivered. It is their supply chain. It is looking at how knowledge flows through the business. That's where the savings are going to be made. And, if you can save even 1% a month, at the end of 12 months, you've got 12% saving, which any business would give the right arm for. That's a 12% direct dump of money on the profits. So that's significant if we can keep chipping away at everything, look at everything, check everything, just get the data from it, understand it, question things. It's a long-term thing, and it becomes, to the start, the most difficult. What actually happens is once you begin to make those savings, you get feedback, you get, it's one of those dopamine things, you get pleasure from it, and it becomes almost addictive that you get businesses who are absolutely addicted to looking at cost savings all the time and looking at how to make things more efficient. But that also drives quality, and that also drives customer satisfaction. So it's fantastic when it happens. We've worked with many businesses who they live on sort of a business improvement now. They look at it and they think what we would term them as is they've become a learning organisation, that they learn from what they do. They're not just doing the same thing every day. They're learning from what they do and building on their knowledge and understanding. And that's the way they can really make things in big improvements in the business.
No, that's really helpful, Geoff. Thank you. And I suppose that natural first step is at times to reach out for support and, just to remind our audience of the wide range of supports that's available either through ourselves, through the work that Calum and Phoebe do, or across that wider business supports ecosystem. We've got 10 minutes to go. I'm keen to encourage questions from our audience. I've not seen any drop into the chat just yet, but we still have time. But I'm going to come back to you, Alasdair, if you don't mind, because innovation is a big theme for businesses at this point in time. And obviously we've touched on some of the innovative approaches that the businesses can take around technology, but in the work that you do, Alasdair, how do you encourage your clients to foster innovation to reduce costs?
Yeah, interesting one. I suppose in terms of the technology that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and we recommend to businesses, there is an inherent mistrust in the technology itself. We don't know if it does work, and myths surrounding all of that, whether that be electric vehicles or solar panels, and trying to dispel all of them, but also necessarily understanding and trusting the providers of that technology. And as we move further on into reducing the carbon impacts of the electricity grid and the supply of that, there's massive innovation work going on outside of business, further upstream in the grid and the local service distribution service operators. Those are happening already, and it's making sure that businesses are using platforms such as the Pilot Brew provide, is using those to great advantage to, for example, look at how and when you're using energy and make best use of. Phoebe was talking about tariffs earlier, and the time of use one is really starting to rear its head a lot more. So moving away from those peak times of 4:30 to 7 on a weekday. So the way in which AI can help to improve the operating profit of a business, but also reducing the pressure on the grid as we all try to electrify everything, and also significantly reduce the carbon impacts. So knowing when the grid is greener, and potentially looking at that. So innovation in itself within a business, they always tend to go hand in hand. So businesses that are looking to invest in newer technologies and be more innovative aren't necessarily always the leanest, but they are always looking at ways in which they can improve their resource efficiency, reduce their cost, reduce energy as well. So they tend to go quite nicely together.
Yeah, and a bit like Geoff referenced, that becomes a habit over time, almost an addiction to a certain degree. We are coming towards the end of our webinar today. Again, just to encourage, if the audience has any questions for our panel, please do drop them in. I'm just going to do a quick fire across all four of you. I'm going to commit to each of you in turn. If you could provide our audience one top tip on how they might go away today and consider how to reduce their business or their business costs or expenses, what would that tip be? So I'm going to come to you first, Phoebe.
Mine would be don't be afraid to invest in technology that is going to ultimately save on carbon and cost, because I think there's sometimes an element in the market where you can't see a quick return on these kinds of projects, and you can. You really, really can see a return quite quickly, especially with the way that the energy prices have gone over the last few years.
Definitely. Thanks, Phoebe. What about you, Calum?
Well, I guess from a supply chain logistics point of view, I've mentioned it before, but really understand the flows in your business, material flow going through the business and information flow or data flow. Really get to grips with those. They will show you great opportunities to reduce cost, improve service, etc.
Brilliant. Thanks, Calum. Alasdair.
Yeah, I think it's sort of blend into what Phoebe was saying, but we do tend to find companies who have previously investigated energy efficiency opportunities, maybe 2, 4, 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and a line has been drawn through that project, and they've said it's not worth it. Cost isn't there, the savings aren't there. Well, obviously, as you can imagine, the cost of the technology has fallen, and the cost of energy has risen. And those are now, we're finding, I don't know, as an example, I keep talking about LED or PV, solar panel projects, but we used to be talking about solar panel projects that were 7 to 10 year payback. Those are now down to, for some of as quick as 2 years to pay back for a solar panel project on the roof of a warehouse or a manufacturing site or an office. So revisit those projects, and you may be very surprised about the potential returns. And it just becomes a very, very obvious, let's just sign the purchase order tomorrow, let's just get on and do it.
That's great. And Geoff, what about you?
I'm going to sort of do two top tips. The first one is do something. Already said that one. And then with Calum on the sort of the process mapping, we would say is process map, knowledge flow, process map, material flow. It's really good that it's a very simple way of looking at your business processes and understanding, is it still fit for purpose? Do lumps still remain of processes that you are redundant now, that we don't need anymore? But process mapping, very simple thing to do. Do it with a bit of paper, some post-it notes. If you'd like, we've got workshops on how to do it and how to work with it. Come to us, we'll show you how to do it. It's a very quick way of understanding what is really happening in the business and actually getting the full good view of how the actual business works. And it's always good to do it quite regularly. So if you've done it before, do it again. You don't know what new processes have changed and how things have happened. So keep process mapping in mind. When things go wrong, go back to it and have a look at it.
Thanks, Geoff. And that recurrent message through our resilience webinars is there's help out there. So please reach out, ask for help. There's a wide range of organizations that want to support your business in reducing their costs. So a huge thank you to our panel today for their insights, their expertise. I know that the panel are all on hand. If anyone wants to reach out to them individually, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to have a conversation around how they can help. We haven't had any audience questions today. Hopefully our audience are all considering the advice that's been given. But if you do come away from today's webinar and you do have a question, then please do reach out to us here at the Greater Manchester Business Growth Hub. You can ask our chatbot on our website and they'll be able to provide you guidance and signposting to the relevant support, or just give us a call. Some people like the old style. Give us a call, speak to our inquiries team, and they'll direct you to the support that's available. I did mention that we are now halfway through our resilience webinar series. I think Haley in the background might be about to share a slide which just details the future schedule. So on the 6th of March, we're going to be talking with a panel around understanding and managing business finance. On the 20th of March, our panel's focus will be on business planning. And on the 3rd of April, we'll be delving into employment and employment law. All of our webinar series, as I mentioned before, have been recorded. So you can visit our YouTube channel if you want to view historic recordings. Thank you. A final thank you to today's audience for joining us. Hopefully you have come away with something from today. And we look forward to welcoming you on our future webinar series. So thanks again, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.